We're getting recorded. Since I always said so yeah, this I want to take the video because I need that typing I'm going today, so I just listen to the video and get my listen. So
you
focus
can
on
do
this.
a voice recording instead of video.
No, I'm gonna get it, don't worry.
We're just making the voice.
But because I have my okay. So the point is what's the driving school about? Like what's the driving school about?
What is the driving school all
What
about?
about yeah.
Basically, driving school is an institute that actually trains people how to drive.
Yeah.
And basically, it's not just about driving alone, because driving is actually a lifetime. You know, you learn how to drive. 10 years down the line, you're still driving. 50 years down the line, you're still driving. And you pass it on to generation to generation. So you learning how to drive is a lifetime skill. That's what driving is about. And it's not just driving, it's about safety and being aware of what's going on around you.
So do you prepare them for exams as well?
The main aim, the way it works is basically the driving in this country is divided into 3 stages.
Okay.
So the first stage is for you to get your apply. Once 3 months before you're 17, you can apply for your provisional license. Once you apply for your provisional license, you can't start training until 17. But as soon as you're 17, you can start learning how to drive. But then the next stage after provisional license is to pass your theory test. Because without a theory test, you cannot move on to taking your practical exams. So the theory test is divided into 2 sections as well. So you study to know the road sign, the safety and everything. And also the second part of it is the asset perception, which is basically you being aware of what could cause an accident around you. So you just make sure a better type of driver, it makes you aware of your surroundings, if that makes sense to you. So that's that stage. And then after they've got to the provisional license, you can't start learning how to drive until you have a provisional license. So once you have a provisional license, the law says you should have about 56 hours of training.
Okay.
But depending on the individual, some people learn how to drive within 40 hours. Some people learn within 25 hours.
So is it dependent on the number of hours you can learn, or is it like a fixed time you have
No,
to
it's
teach?
dependent on you as an individual. The faster you learn something.
Okay, so the time scale is not determined by the driving school.
The time scale is not divided by the driver's school. Ours is to get you to a stage where we know that you're safe enough, you're aware of what's going on in good driving, and then ours is to make sure that you're a safe driver. Because there's no point in you training how to drive, but we're not making sure you're a safe driver. So we won't take you for a test, make sure that you can drive very well, and you're aware of the safety that is involved around it. So individually, some people do 60 hours, some people do 70, some people do 50, but the law says you should do at least 56.
Okay, that's
So
like the minimum.
that's the minimum, but sometimes people even do before that 56.
Okay.
And then after that is that when you now go for your driving test.
Okay.
So our job is basically just to train you to know how to drive and to make sure you're a good driver before going for the test.
Okay. Okay, I think I can make sense. Okay, so you said according to what you said they enroll after they've passed the exam and gotten a provisional license.
But they enroll, the first stage is for them to get a provisional license.
Yeah.
So after they've gotten a provisional license, they can now enroll with a driving school to start taking the lesson. But the only thing there is they can now pass the driving test until they pass the theory test.
They cannot
Pass the driving test. They cannot seek for the driving
driving
test
test, okay.
unless you actually pass your theory test.
Okay.
So that's the prerequisite for you to take your practical test.
Okay. So how do they get charged? Is it based on the number of hours they use or
So every driving school have different offers.
okay.
So some company can say for the first 1 hour is free. Someone else will say for the first 1 hour is £99 or whatever. But they get charged per hour.
Per hour.
Yeah. And then a lot of company actually organize.
Sorry?
A lot of company actually organize what's it called? A price for bulk ticket.
For what?
Bulk.
Okay, bulk.
So for instance, do you now
Thank you, sir. Oh, yeah, just about your friends, alright, yeah.
Is it just okay like that?
Just record.
Okay.
So the way they charge, the way the system for price invoices, and then you base in your area. So if you're in central London, you get to charge a lot more
So you get charges in area as well.
based on area.
Okay.
So and then based on your driving schools, or then we worked out. Everyone works out the best price to meet the market. It's a very competitive market. So you need to work out that good average price for you to charge people. Some people could charge you £27, some company will charge £24, some charge £22. So depending on your surrounding and you doing your research, to know how much people are willing to pay, then you can now make your prices on that.
So there's no fixed market price.
There's no fixed. There's no fixed.
It's based on each company's discretion.
That's it.
Perfect. So do they get monthly or driving reports? Like, do they get reports for their driving tests?
So again, that is down to individual driving school. So for instance, some driving school offers 1 hour lessons.
Yeah.
Some people offer 2 hours lessons. Some people offer 3 hours every time. So, but the way it works is that it starts with a lesson, you go over what you've done in that last lesson, just a recap. And at the end of the lesson, you also fill people in to let them know how they're doing, how they're performing. And then during the driving lesson on his own as well, you still also highlight anything that could be dangerous, for instance. So if a driver is staring too much and they're staring into a pole, for instance, you need to highlight that and deal with it straight away.
So you kind of recap from the previous class, like you make corrections
So,
as they make the
all right,
mistakes.
let me make it even better for you. So every lesson, you have to have a lesson outline.
Yeah.
So you need to let your clients know what they're coming in to do. So as soon as you set a lesson date or time, you need to let them know once they get into their car, okay, our target today is for you to be able to turn left or turn right.
Okay.
And then as soon as they could do that, do you understand? So that will be what you're working towards. So if they make a mistake turning left, at least you could correct them. And then at the end of the lesson, you also review what you set out to do.
Okay.
And then if we meet the target, did we not? How did you think you did? And then you can assess the lesson based on that. And then that would now allow you to go to the next level, to set yourself another target for the next lesson.
Yeah. So how do you inform them about the next class? Do you call them?
That is where you now get complicated, because depending on the size of your driving school, the ideal thing to do is to send out a text.
That's the key thing to do.
Call them up to let them know that they're having a lesson, so we can both agree. Because you could I could put in my diary now and say, you're having a lesson tomorrow at 2 o'clock, but I don't know if you're free yet. So I need to call you to know what your own working pattern is, if you're free or not. And then that way, if we both agree that you're free, then I'll put that into my diary, and then I'll also send you a confirmation text.
So like how do you think this situation can be best solved? Do you think there should be like a set time where the driving school says, okay, these are the times we
the way it's very complicated, because people that you're teaching, they have different diaries. Some people shift pattern, so they can work maybe 7 to 8, 7 from the morning to 8 p.m. Some people could do 3 to 7. So depending on what their own workplace is, so you need to be very flexible with your students. So you need to be able to know. So for me, the way I deal with it is actually deal with every client as a project. So for instance, so I need to work out the first question from your first lesson is for you to find out what kind of stuff the person is into. So if they're a student, so at least you know that they're a student. Some students don't go into college every day. Some university students don't go in every day. So you need to find out what days they're free. So as long as you align those things earlier on in the start, it's easy for you to now start, to know, okay, for instance, if you're free Tuesdays and Friday, we can say, okay, you know what, since you're free Tuesdays and Friday, let's book you in for that day. So we can book you in for those periods of time.
Okay, so like in the case of a web application, I just assume that the system has a fixed number of days, and students can choose the time they think they're going to come for driving classes.
It's still going to be difficult for the student to choose. The way thing you could do is, for instance, the best way to do it is for every driving school to have a fix. For me, for my driving school, what we do is every 2 hours, we know we only teach 2 hours, period.
Yeah.
So you know that you have to be out 2 hours, and then you now need to factor into your timing. How long would it take you from the last person to the new client? So you need to give yourself a driving break distance. Do you understand where I'm coming from? So let's say for instance, your lesson is at 9 to 11. There's no way I can get to the next client at 11. So I need to make sure that, okay, I give myself at least 10 to 15 minutes for me to be able to get onto the next client. So that way you're there on time. So that means the next lesson will start 11:15 to 1:15. So, but the way for you to deal with this is at the start of your lesson, at the start, once the person calls your organization to say they're going to start driving lesson, find out, ask a few questions about them. When are they free? How often are they willing to do lessons?
Okay.
Do you understand? Because some people want to do their lessons within 4 weeks and get out of the week. Some people are ready to do lessons every single day of the week. So those are the things that would now trigger how you manage your diary. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And in that way, because if you've got people in your diary already, you know you've already got for the next 4 weeks, someone's got that slot. So you know that for the next 4 weeks, I'm not giving that time to anyone else. And then you know that whoever else wants to come on, that someone else is moving up, then you can bring people in. That's the only way to do it.
Someone else is what?
So, because obviously, someone that started doing less than 10 hours, someone that just started now, and then compared to someone that's already had 20 hours lesson,
Okay.
they're gonna the person that's done 20 hours lesson is gonna finish earlier compared to someone that's just started lesson. So those are the kind of ways that will give you a clarification. So when that person is aiming to finish. And for we do in my organization is that, like I said, we treat everything as a project. So initially, as soon as we meet up, we talk about, okay, when are you looking to achieve to get your driving license? So if we say, for instance, we want to get within 2 months, so at least we know that, okay, we've got you in our books for the next 8 weeks. So that time, we've allocated time slots to you. So for you to now look at your diary now, you know, okay, Martin's got Tuesdays and Friday 2 to 4. So you know that you're that 2 to 4, so you know when to fit other people into that diary. So the main thing is for you to build a relationship with your clients first. Know when they're free and how often they're willing to do the lesson. Then you can now put a fixed time already. So that way you're committed as a driving school, and then the student too is committed.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, I get what
Because
you're saying.
unless you just keep overbooking yourself and then you never have enough time to do on the student. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm looking at how I'll get on the design of that. So so the next one is how do you
So the way your system could now work is, for instance, the diary should not be allowing companies to be able to double book themselves. So even instructor is already allocated 2 to 4 to someone else. That place shouldn't be available for you to pick that time slot to give anymore. So another way that you can look at it is that, for instance, let's say you're working with us now. Yeah. So we know that, okay, we start trading from, let's say, as early as possible. Sometime it could be 6 days in the morning. So we know that, okay, we've divided every lesson because we already agreed that we only do 2 hours slots. So you know you need to give yourself at least 15 minutes to move to someone else. So let's say, for instance, we start at 6. So 6 to 8, that's someone's slot. And you know the next slot that's going to be available is from 8:15 to 10:15. And does that make sense? And then the next one will be 10:30 to 12:30. So as soon as the instructor, as soon as we book someone in for 6 to 8:30, that slot shouldn't be available for you to be able to put in anyone else anymore.
Okay. Well, in the case where you have more than one drivers, how about that?
In the case then you now need to, every instructor will have their own user ID, so that way they can log into the back end of your diary and then be able to find out what they. So even as a driving school, because if everyone has a back end to your system and they can manage their own diary through that, you know what time they've already allocated out to people already. Do you understand where I'm coming from? So you've already, so let's say you're one of the instructors that work for us. So you've got your diary, you already allocated time in that diary. That means if I'm to go and view that diary of yours, you know, as the administrator, I should be able to see what your diary looks like. So even if a student's calling me, I should be able to say, okay, this is this and this. So once your diary, you already put someone in from 6 to 8 o'clock. Even if someone calls me and says, I want to be 6 to 8 o'clock, you know that instructor A is not available anymore. Maybe instructor B, you can check the diary and see what's available.
That's very good design. That's very good design.
So every driving instructor have their own user ID to get to the right side.
So I don't think the next question applies because I was looking at but I don't think the student gets to know the route they'll be driving through on specific days.
The good thing with that is that as a driving school, you tend to know a lot of you have to do it as an instructor.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do your own research. Normally, the government needs to actually show the test routes. You can go on the DSA website and you can see all the test routes for the various driving tests.
What website? DVLA or
DSA.
DSA?
Our Driving Standard Agency.
Okay, DSA website, okay.
Yeah, but now they stopped doing it because the routes changes are very often. So for instance, some of the routes are still the same. So if you know some of them, you can still get some of them online. So it's your job as a driving instructor to actually go trace those routes out yourself. So if they've got 12 routes and you can see 6 or 8 of them is available, you get to know those test routes. So that way it's easier for you to now start training. The way I work in our organization is that our initial stage, if you've never driven before, we start the lesson from the back end, from quiet mode. Once we see that you're getting confident, we start moving into the test route area, so you start practicing.
So what are the test route areas? Are they busy routes?
The way it is, there's the various centers. So for instance, there's no driving test center in Peckham. The closest there is Lucian, which is either Great, or Mitcham, or Croydon. So every test area has their own allocated test routes that the driving examiner will take you on doing your test. So if you already trained your student around those test routes, it's easier for them to get familiar with everything.
Oh, okay. So if I'm going to understand, what I'm saying is that if they finally go for their practical test,
yeah, they're ready. You know,
they might be taken to any of those routes to drive.
That's right.
So you have to just have to. Okay.
So for instance, there could be 12 routes. You're not sure which one of them they're going to give to you. So those are the kind of things you need to be able to do. You know, if you've gone over all those 12 routes and you're familiar with those routes, it makes it easy and give you a better chance of you passing your test. Because whatever they're going to ask you to do, you're already aware of what you need to do. So for instance, if they're asking you to take a second exit on the roundabout, you know what lane position to stay on already. But if you're not familiar with that test route, there's a good chance of you making a mistake that could cost you.
Even if you can drive.
Even if you can drive.
So how does that justify someone who spends 40 hours and yet hasn't been to all those test routes?
That's you see, as a driving school, you have to start teaching your student around the test routes, because that way it helps them. That's part of what they're paying for, you know, because you start doing the lessons around those areas where they start getting themselves familiar with the test routes, test areas, know the speed limit, know what signs are there. Because if you're not aware of the signs, the road signs or the speed limit, there's a good chance of you making mistakes.
Okay. So the final question, basically, you know, I understand that you've been used to the management system. What the way you spoke about these tutors having an idea and everything. Because I was looking at AA driving school, and I think that's the system to practice.
Yeah.
Now, based on that, what do you think? What do you think is really missing in this kind of information system? What do you think is missing that you think can be added to enhance it or something?
For me, it will be difficult for me to say what AA is when it's doing wrong. You know, because I've never
I'm not saying what it is.
No, I'm saying about their own
what
management system.
Yeah, what can be?
Because I've never seen the function of their own management system.
No, anyone you know,
Okay.
I just hear as an example because that's where I'm familiar with it.
So the main thing first is, you know, as for your project, the best thing for you to do is like what you're doing now is for you to gather all the requirements verification, do your briefing to know what you actually need a system for. Because that way is how you'll be able to know what to design, if that makes sense. Because, for instance, it could be maybe that people are double booking on the system. For me, because the organization, it could be double booking.
Okay, double booking, okay.
Yeah, for me, for us now, because the organization is still quite small. Yeah. By the time we start having other drivers joining us, then I need to start thinking of that kind of a manager system, which is where this comes in handy for us, which is okay. How do we manage people's data? You know, because you need to think of data protection as well, because you're collecting people's data. How do you store the data? Do you understand? And then the next thing after that is that how do we now manage those diaries? Because if you have 100 drivers, how do you allocate jobs to 100 drivers? How do you get to see what their diaries look like? So those are the kind of things you need to start looking into. Because it's only of recent that AA actually introduced iPad to the driving instructors. Before it used to be over the phone, or each instructor managed their own diary and then just paid transaction.
So the iPad, how does it work? They send information to the system.
Yeah, that's it. So for instance, if you go on AA website now and you book 10 hours, you're a new student, you book 10 hours, AA will go through the diaries or the list of instructors around that area and find out who is the best person to reach. So if you live in Peckham and someone is booking for a driving lesson in Peckham, it only makes sense for you to allocate a driving instructor that lives in Peckham to deal with that, not someone that lives from Brixton who is coming all the way to Peckham. So that way you can allocate the you could allocate a driving instructor to that student. And then the way it works is after you, from what I've spoken to the drivers, so I don't want to say I know exactly, but obviously they refer a student to you. They take their own commission for referring a student to you, and then based on that, they will now pass those details of that student to you as a driving instructor. So it's your job to now call the student to say, okay, when are you looking to start your lesson? So that they actually allow each driver to manage their own diary.
Now, the last thing is, from what you said, it's not a fixed number of hours. Because what I'm looking at working at is like working at a payment system where students get to pay online. What I'm saying is, if it's not fixed,
you could pay online, because the people do it already.
Okay.
But the problem is, you can't say, okay, do 10 hours. Yeah, there are various different price packages. So for instance, someone that's done 10 hours of driving before might not need to do 10, might just need to do 30 or 40 hours. Someone that's never done a driving before might need to do 50 or 40 hours. So they will need to ask you questions based on your booking system. Have you had any driving experience before? How long ago was it? How many
can
hours?
send them details of payment or something.
In that way, you could get them to book for the first 10 hours. That's what they will ever get you to do.
Okay.
Get you to book for the first 10 hours. And then within that 10 hours, your driving instructor will be able to tell you, I recommend that you need another 30 hours. And then they'll be able to recommend how many hours to finish it. But you can't automatically. I had that same problem this morning, this afternoon. Someone called me and said, okay, I've got a friend that wants to do a driving lesson, he's never driven before. How much would you charge him in total? So somebody wants you to charge them a fixed price of maybe £1,000. They might not need £1,000 lesson. They might need £500 lesson. Or they might even go over 1,000. So how do you balance it?
So like you kind of make a diagnosis based on the first 10 hours.
So the first thing I do with any client is, if I ask you, have you had any driving lesson before, and you said no, then at least I know that you've never had any experience. So I've got a rough idea of how many hours you need to do. Yeah? But for instance, if you've got people that have moved over from different countries into the UK and they need to drive, and they've been driving for the past 15 years, do you understand? They're not in the same group as someone that's never had any lesson before. People will tell you, I only think I need 10 hours, but you can't agree with them. You can only tell them, okay, you know what, come for an assessment of 2 hours. Let me see your driving. Based on that, I can recommend how many hours I think you need for me.
With the assessment, they pay for it?
You have to pay for it.
Okay. Thanks so much,
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. Is there any other thing I'm going to
Any other
call you, text you? Yeah, that's it. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
But I can
Excuse myself.
You won't be. Did you go?
Oh, indeed.